They say betrayal doesn't always scream, it sometimes whispers across the dinner table, dressed in laughter, a glass of wine, and the sound of a heart breaking. That night, when I walked into the restaurant with my parents, I thought it was going to be a quiet family dinner. The kind where we'd sit down, share stories, laugh over the little things, and maybe pretend for a few hours that the world outside didn't exist. I thought it was about togetherness, about love. I had no idea I was about to watch my family split in two, right before my eyes, with the simplest and cruelest of gestures. Stay with me, because what happened at that table was only the beginning, and the night would spiral into something none of us could have imagined. The restaurant was warm, glowing with dim golden lights, the kind of place where every table felt private. My mother wore her favorite blue dress, the one she always saved for special occasions. She'd curled her hair, dabbed on lipstick, and even wore the ring she never took off, the same ring my father gave her on the day he promised forever. That ring had seen years of sacrifices, birthdays, hospital visits, and late-night prayers. To me, it wasn't just a ring. It was my mother's courage, her story etched into something small but unbreakable. Or at least, I thought it was unbreakable. We were halfway through our meal when my father cleared his throat and stood. He had that confident smile, the one he wore in business meetings, the smile that could charm or intimidate depending on what he wanted. He tapped his glass, and all eyes at the table turned to him. But before he spoke, my heart sank. Because sitting beside him, dressed in a red silk dress that glistened under the lights, was a woman I had only seen in glimpses before, whispers in the office, an unfamiliar perfume on his jacket, the shadow in the back of a car window. My father's mistress. I froze. My mother froze. The room, though filled with laughter and clinking glasses, suddenly felt suffocating. My father reached for my mother's hand, no, not her hand, but the ring on her finger. That sacred circle she had worn every day since their vows. And then, with no hesitation, no respect, no shame, he pulled it off her finger, held it up like it was nothing more than a trinket, and with one sharp twist, he broke it. The sound was faint, but it echoed in my chest like a thunderclap. He placed one half of the broken ring in his mistress's palm as if crowning her with a victory, while my mother sat motionless, her hands now bare, stripped of the symbol that had carried her dignity for decades. You might think in that moment someone would have screamed, or thrown a glass, or stormed out. But the silence that followed was heavier than any outburst could have been. My mother's face turned pale, her lips pressed tight, her eyes burning with something between rage and sorrow. She didn't cry, not there, not in front of them. She just sat still, holding herself together with a kind of strength that terrified me. I wanted to leap across the table, to grab that broken piece back, to shout that he had no right. But then I felt her hand slide under the table, trembling, clutching mine with a quiet command, "Don't." Her whisper was faint, but I heard it clear as day. "Don't give him the satisfaction of seeing us break." The mistress giggled awkwardly, as if this was some kind of twisted romance. She lifted her glass in a mock toast, her eyes glancing at my father with a smugness that made my skin crawl. And my father raised his glass too, as if this betrayal was a celebration, a rebirth of something new, while the family he already had sat collapsing in silence. I stared at the table, at the half of the ring that still lay there, cold and abandoned. That little piece carried my childhood, my mother's sacrifices, every holiday meal, every bedtime story, every morning she woke up before us to make sure we were cared for. That ring had survived everything life had thrown at us, but it could not survive his hands. I felt my chest tighten, my throat closing. My mother's hand still held mine, but her grip loosened slowly, like she was letting go of something far greater than me, like she was letting go of him. When the dinner ended, no one spoke. We walked out in silence, the night air colder than I remembered, though it was only early spring. My father didn't ride home with us. He stayed behind with her, laughing as though nothing had happened. I sat beside my mother in the car, watching her reflection in the window. Her face was calm, but her eyes told a different story. They glistened with unshed tears, though she held them back with an iron will. Not one drop fell. She would not let him see her cry, not even when no one else was watching. At home, she walked straight to her room, closed the door, and left me sitting alone at the dining table. I stared at the empty seat where he should have been. I remembered birthdays he once spent planning surprises for her, the way he used to hold her hand when they crossed the street. I remembered the laughter that once filled these walls, the love I thought was unshakable. And now, all of it felt like a cruel joke, a performance staged for years, ending with a single broken ring. That night, I cried into my pillow, muffling the sobs so she wouldn't hear. I felt small, powerless, as though my entire world had been rewritten in a single act. Betrayal has a way of making you question everything, every word, every smile, every memory. I wondered how long it had been going on, how many dinners he had already spent with her while we waited at home, how many lies he had told just to keep his double life alive. I thought the humiliation would end there, confined to that room, that table, those few witnesses. I thought we could at least keep the pain private, nurse it in silence, away from the eyes of the world. But life doesn't work that way. Because what we didn't know, what none of us could have predicted, was that the entire dinner had been captured. The restaurant had a hidden live camera feed, used for promotion, broadcasting scenes of family joy and celebratory dinners to its online followers. And that night, it broadcasted us. The laughter, the breaking of the ring, the shameless toast, it was all there, streamed for strangers to see. By the time I woke up the next morning, the video had already begun circling social media. The world was watching, though we had no idea yet. If you think betrayal is private, stay with me. Because the night my father broke my mom's ring, the whole world watched, and that was only the beginning. The morning after the dinner, I woke up to the buzzing of my phone. At first, I thought it was just the usual group messages or emails. But as soon as I opened the screen, my heart dropped. Notifications were flooding in, friends, acquaintances, even distant relatives tagging me, messaging me, asking if I had seen it. And there it was, the video. My father, at the restaurant, breaking my mother's ring, placing it in the hands of his mistress, and raising a glass as if mocking the vows he had once made. The comments were pouring in faster than I could read them, some in disbelief, others filled with rage on behalf of my mother. The betrayal we thought we could keep hidden had become a spectacle overnight. The entire world seemed to be watching our family unravel in real time. Headlines appeared within hours. Business tycoon humiliates wife in public dinner. Memes were being made, jokes flying across platforms, and, still, amid the noise, there was an undertone of anger and heartbreak. Strangers who had never met my mother were already defending her with a kind of passion I couldn't even summon in that moment. My mother hadn't seen it yet. She was still asleep when I sat on the couch, staring at the glowing screen in my hands, unsure whether to hide it or show her. When she finally came out of her room, she looked exhausted but composed. Her eyes met mine, and in that silent exchange, she already knew something was wrong. I handed her the phone with shaking fingers. She watched the video without a word, her lips tightening as the scene replayed, her dignity stripped, her devotion discarded, broadcasted for strangers to consume like a soap opera. When it ended, she closed her eyes, took a long breath, and handed me back the phone. I suppose it was bound to happen, she said softly. Secrets don't stay secrets forever. At first, she wanted to retreat. She told me to delete every app, to avoid the comments, to stay away from the storm that was gathering. But there was no avoiding it. By evening, the video had already amassed millions of views. It wasn't just a clip anymore, it was a phenomenon. Talk shows debated it, social media exploded with threads, and people dissected every second of her pain. Some called my father ruthless. Others labeled the mistress as a home wrecker. But what surprised me most was how many people turned their attention not to the scandal, but to my mother herself. They called her strong, graceful, dignified in her silence. They noticed the way she didn't scream or throw anything, the way she held herself together even as the ground gave way beneath her. Women from all over began sharing their own stories under her video, telling the world how they too had been humiliated, cheated on, discarded. They saw in my mother not just a victim but a reflection of themselves, and in her silence, they found courage to speak. At first, my mother resisted this attention. She stayed inside, drawing the curtains, turning off the television. But I watched her change slowly, almost reluctantly. She began to read the messages, one by one. Women thanking her for her strength, strangers telling her she deserved better, communities reaching out to support her. It was as if her private pain had unlocked a collective voice that refused to be silenced. And in their stories, she began to rediscover her own. Meanwhile, my father's empire began to crumble. The company he had built over decades started receiving calls from investors demanding answers. Clients no longer wanted to associate with his name. He had always prided himself on being the face of family values, the successful man with a devoted wife by his side. But now, the image was shattered, and so was the trust that came with it. The board members of his company held emergency meetings, trying to salvage what was left, but every headline dragged him deeper into disgrace. The mistress, once paraded like a prize, now faced a storm of her own. She had thought the broken ring was a symbol of love, but the world saw it as the ultimate mark of betrayal. The same people who once envied her beauty now mocked her, dissecting her every smile, every gesture in that video. She tried to play the victim, releasing statements about true love, but it only made things worse. The world had chosen sides, and she was on the losing end. Through it all, my mother began to rise. Slowly at first, accepting invitations from women's groups who wanted her to speak, sharing her thoughts in small gatherings. She never blamed, never lashed out publicly. Instead, she spoke about dignity, about the quiet power of not letting betrayal define you. Her voice shook in the beginning, but the more she spoke, the stronger it grew. Soon, she was being invited to larger events, her story becoming a symbol of resilience for countless women who had suffered in silence for too long. I watched her transformation with awe. This was the same woman who once trembled at the dinner table, holding my hand to keep us both from falling apart. And now she stood tall before hundreds, her chin lifted, her words steady, her presence commanding respect. She even began a foundation, a safe place for women who had been betrayed, humiliated, or abused, where they could find support and rebuild their lives. What had begun as a moment of destruction was becoming the cornerstone of something beautiful, something powerful. My father tried to reach out. He called, he wrote, he even showed up at the house once, begging for forgiveness. But my mother had changed. She no longer looked at him with longing or anger, only with a calmness that unsettled him. She told him, "You didn't just break a ring. You broke the life we built. And I will not rebuild it for you." Then she closed the door, and this time, it stayed closed. For me, the journey was equally transformative. I had always leaned on my parents' marriage as proof that love could last, that promises meant something. Watching it fall apart so publicly left me raw, distrustful, lost. But as I saw my mother rise from the ashes, I realized something. Pain doesn't always destroy, it can also build. Betrayal doesn't always end stories, it can write new ones. My mother showed me that even when someone tries to break you, you can rise, piece by piece, stronger than before. Months later, I sat beside her backstage at an event. She was scheduled to speak in front of nearly 1,000 women that evening. She wore a new ring, not on her wedding finger, but on the other hand. A simple gold band she had bought for herself, a symbol not of marriage, but of her own worth. As I watched her fidget with it, I asked, "Do you ever think about that night? About the ring he broke?" She smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting both sorrow and strength. "I do," she admitted. "But not with pain anymore. I think of it as the night I was set free. Sometimes, the things that break us are the very things that open the door to who we're meant to be." She went on stage that night and spoke words that silenced the entire room. She told her story, not with bitterness, but with a quiet pride. And when she finished, the standing ovation was deafening. She looked out at the crowd, tears shining in her eyes, and I realized something important. The affair may have been broadcast live that night, but so was her rebirth. The world hadn't just witnessed her humiliation, they had witnessed her transformation. And so if you're watching this, wondering if you can survive the betrayal you're living through, remember my mother's story. Remember that sometimes the things meant to break you end up broadcasting your strength instead. You may not choose the betrayal, but you can choose what comes after. You can choose to rise. So if you're watching this, thinking you can't survive betrayal, remember my mother's story. Sometimes, what breaks you can also broadcast your strength to the world. And when the world watches, let them see you rise.